Welcome to Halftime. I'm Doug Piper, and I'm a halftime alumni from Greenville, South Carolina. And this is our 43rd live streaming event. I'm so appreciative of your joining us today. I know everybody's super busy, and carving out a few minutes is just really precious. So thank you so much for joining us. Now, you're here with Halftime, and Halftime is the world's leading peer learning center for successful people who are in transition. We teach, coach, and connect leaders who are looking for more meaning, joy, and impact in their next season. We have virtual roundtable seats coming up, and the link down at the bottom, you can click on that and email Lloyd. Now, even though many find nonprofits more fulfilling, so many halftime alumni pursue entrepreneurship. They're more comfortable with for-profit because they can run fast and they can run free. Well, others choose this route of self-supporting social enterprises using good business principles to produce profound transformation. But now, how do you fit the gospel into business? Well, in the next 30 minutes, we're going to hear how to use your entrepreneurial skills to make a 100-fold impact on God. So we are going to bring everybody up on screen, hopefully successfully. There we go. Well, today we have halftime alumni Chris Crane. He's an expert at this. He's got a Harvard MBA, and after 25 years of business experience, moved into venture capital, later acquired Comps Info Systems, guided it back to profitabilities, later acquired 13 other companies through private equity, and conducted an IPO, later selling it all to a publicly traded company. Now he's CEO of the largest U.S.-based Christian microfinance business. It operates in 28 developing nations, over 10,000 staff, with 30% year-over-year growth and 1.5 billion families served annually. Now, in addition, with Tiger Dawson, he co-founded Edify, and they have 7,000 financially sustainable Christian schools, educating over 2 million poverty-stricken kids in 10 African and Latin American countries. Now, normally I would be also introducing our co-founder, halftime Lloyd Reeb. He normally leads our discussions, but today he's recuperating from a brief illness, and I'm going to do my best. So, Chris, today you got to be gentle. So, Chris, after graduating, I joined a small startup. I went through a buyout, a couple of private equity deals, and we finally sold out to a publicly traded company. Now, certainly Christian principles were incorporated, but they were generally unspoken. They were practiced, but it was rare for anything biblical to be openly discussed. Now, what do you recommend to Christians to both serve your employer, but also your customers?
Thanks, Doug. It's great to be with everyone today. Thank you for joining us. I think that we are called to use our influence in the workplace for Jesus Christ and to share the gospel. Obviously, that has to be done in a very sensitive manner and just at the right times. I'm pleased you asked that question because I've actually written a book on this subject. I'll hold it up and see if it looks like it can be seen, but looks like it's the mirror image. But anyway, it's called Executive Influence, Impacting Your Workplace for Christ. And anyone who would like a copy of that book free, we'll make those available to them. But we talked with 12 different business people, some entrepreneurs, some CEOs of large companies that they were professional managers. And there's almost always a way to share your faith. It has to be done discreetly. If you're the CEO or the owner of the business, you have a little more flexibility, but again, it depends on what state you are in. I live in California, which is less friendly to Christian sharing of the gospel in the workplace than perhaps a number of other states. But so one of the things, I'll just use an example. There was a group of businessmen in town, and every month they would bring in a speaker, someone who, not necessarily a world famous person, but someone who had a very interesting background. It might be known to most people. And we just say, gee, come to this lunch, and each of we businessmen in the group would buy, business people, I should say. There were certainly business women. We would buy a table of 10 seats, and we would say, let's bring, we purposed in our hearts to fill up those other 9 seats with people who didn't know the Lord. And we would tell everyone, hey, you're welcome to come to this. Here's this interesting speaker, his background. But once you know, he's going to share about his relationship with God. And if that would make you uncomfortable, then by all means, don't accept this invitation. And so people would come, and I would also invite employees. So we gave them a very easy out. And I remember one time I brought one of my employees who didn't know the Lord. And after the lunch, we're driving back. And as we're pulling into the parking lot, he said, is there any reason that I can't receive Jesus as my Lord and Savior right now? I said, no reason. So we just drove around the back of the building, parked there, and I just went through the 4 spiritual laws, and he accepted Jesus as his Lord. So there are those opportunities. Others were more open in their workplace, probably in different states other than California. But if we pray and we seek the Lord, we ask the Lord, how can I best share you? And Lord, please bring across my path people who you want me to share the gospel with. Then the Lord honors that prayer so often. And then when he does bring someone across to mind, pray 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time for that person to really make the ground fertile for that person to receive the Lord.
Gosh, I love that. It's such a methodical approach, and as an engineer, I appreciate that. You know that, Chris. Well, speaking of people crossing paths, I never met Bob Buford, but I feel like I've gotten to know him from reading his books and stories from you and others. Now, I think Bob was actually a mentor for you, and what did he say about entrepreneurial leadership and taking those skills to other areas?
Bob thought, and Bob being a great entrepreneur himself, cable television entrepreneur, he felt that entrepreneurs can cause so much benefit or bring so much benefit. They can have such big impact. And Bob was especially interested in entrepreneurs who had been in business or perhaps other pursuits in life, and then decided to move, as Lloyd Reed would say, from success to significance, to leave their business and then to go into a field where they could really benefit perhaps disadvantaged people, and especially while doing that to share the gospel with those people. So it might be starting a social enterprise, in order that social enterprises can be for-profit or nonprofit, but if they're for-profit, in addition to a profit motive, they're trying to overcome one of the great societal problems, such as lack of good education or lack of health care for many people, or overcome violence in some of the developing nations, or overcome corruption in developing nations. So they have a second important bottom line that they're trying to do that's for the benefit of humanity in that particular region.
You really lit up when I asked you that question. I could tell. Bob must have been quite an inspiration to you, but Bob was quite an entrepreneur. Clearly you are also, but I don't know that everyone is cut out to be an entrepreneur, are they?
I think not. We all have different callings. Thank heavens, some people are called to be professional managers. I'm thinking of my COO at my company, who, by God's grace, then once I started Edify, which is, we work with what we call low-fee independent Christian schools that are financially sustainable. They charge 50 cents to $1 a day, and they are fully financially sustainable if they have 300 children or more, and they teach the gospel along with good education. He joined me to be our COO at Edify, but he was a true professional manager. And so when I'd come in with some, a lot of entrepreneurs get lots of different ideas. I remember Millard Fuller, who's a friend of mine, the founder of Habitat for Humanity, but I was also friends with Millard's chief operating officer. Millard's chief operating officer would say, Millard's dreams are my nightmares. Millard will go overseas. He'll go build a house in Africa. He comes back with 7 new ideas he wants me to implement right away. Millard, we haven't been able to implement the ideas from your last trip. So having a good professional manager that I'm just thinking of the gentleman, Chris Fenton, who helped me. Chris Fenton would say, hey, who's got the bandwidth to do this? Where do we have the financial resource to do that? And by the way, if we do what you're saying, and then won't this, and that happen, and then won't this happen? And, wow, I didn't think it through that far. And so it's just so important to have someone who then, once we come up with an idea that really does make sense, then to have a professional manager to implement that well, because some visionary entrepreneurs are off to the next idea.
Well, I don't know a lot about Millard, but he and yourself seem to be different kinds of entrepreneurs. So are there actually more than just the differences between the two of you? Are there, more than just two?
Yes. I think there are the visionary entrepreneurs that which I think I'm one, that are, they're inspirational, or hopefully I was inspirational, who entrust management to professional managers once you get to a certain point. There are those startup entrepreneurs who love the challenge of starting from scratch, but often are not the ones to take it to the next level. And hopefully they realize that and then turn it over to someone. There are ramp-up entrepreneurs who come in, let's say that an organization might be 10, 20, 30 years old, but it's just in need of some just much greater growth. They've just been growing at a few percent a year. So that ramp-up entrepreneur can take them to a rapidly scale up. And then there are turnaround entrepreneurs who run into troubled situations that losing money may go under, and that turnaround expert has done it before, probably numerous times, and knows how to make the right decisions to reduce costs and then to capture secure revenues to keep the organization in business, and then either stays to continue to run the organization, grow up, but much more often goes off to another turnaround. And there are other entrepreneurs, those types of entrepreneurs as well.
Well, it sounds like you've actually been a different entrepreneur at different stages in your life too, because
Yes.
you were actually one of those turnaround entrepreneurs, weren't you?
Yes, I was. When I came into just that, I'll say, Opportunity International, it had lost $2 million the year before, which with their on $8 million of revenues, that's a big problem. So it was a turnaround, and the board was clear this is a turnaround. They wanted a turnaround entrepreneur and a ramp-up entrepreneur. And frankly, when that offer was made to me, I sold my company shortly before. I thought, wow, this is not a fit for me at all. This is a nonprofit. It's a Christian ministry. It's doing microfinance in 28 different nations. Wow. I am a for-profit guy. I don't think there's a fit. So they had their search committee at the board, and they had a executive recruiter, and I really resisted the whole time. But in my daily scripture reading, the Lord brought to life, they were the scriptures about helping the poor, of which there are over 2,000 such scriptures, started jumping off the page at me. And I realized I needed to be open to it. And I spoke with my long-term mentor, Merrill Oster. And Merrill's my role model for a Christian business person, a Christian entrepreneur. And Merrill listened, and he said, Chris, what's your downside here? So you do this. If it doesn't work, at the time I was 50 years old, he said, so it doesn't work out, you just go back into business afterwards. But he said, if the Lord's calling you to this and you don't follow that, you don't obey, then that will be a terrible loss in your life. And so that would really spoke to me. And I'm so glad he gave me that advice, because that, along with all of the work that Bob Buford did, his books and his mentoring of me, just inspired me to say, okay, let me give this a try, even though it's it's out of my comfort zone. It's so different. I'm not sure my skills will transfer, but they did, and most did. And my life is so much richer because I did take that jump into social entrepreneurship.
I tell you, God seems to have a way of putting us in positions where we have to make hard decisions and brings us to our knees. And, I guess that's what kind of brings to mind, especially in turnaround situations. And you want to stay gospel centered, but turnaround situations require really tough decisions. How do you stay gospel centered and try and turn around a company and not be overbearing, obnoxious, or maybe what comes across as insincere?
Those are really valid questions, Doug. You try to be as candid as you can with staff when you come in and say, "Look, we have an existential situation here. This is organization life threatening. So some decisions are going to have to be made to keep us afloat. And I realize that not everyone's going to agree with these decisions, and they're going to be a challenge. And the first thing I always did is went to the senior executives and said, "Look, I really want you to agree to take half of your pay. We got to cut your pay in half because we're going to ask other people to take pay cuts, not as much as you, but you're paid more than they are. And then also we're going to have to let people go. Everyone needs to see the senior executives sacrificing along with others. So, and you will be criticized. I remember, and you have to do a mass layoff. Oh, it's so hard to do those. Sometimes it's necessary to keep the organization going. It's seeking the Lord and just praying that you're doing the right thing and following His guidance. So those are always hard situations, but if you can cause an organization, but often as you try to let go those who are contributing the least, and sometimes the organization just does much better afterwards. In fact, sometimes it's producing as much or as it was before because everyone's now galvanized, and you have the A players left. Those who A player in my mind is someone who's really good at what they do, has a really good attitude, and has a good culture fit.
Wow. Well, I know those are difficult, having been through them myself, but let me switch gears a little bit. Now, it seems like tolerance is a big thing now, and political correctness, and we won't dive down that too far, but it espouses tolerance everywhere. Yet it seems like Christianity is treated with quite a bit of intolerance. So how do we work in the gospel and Christianity and not avoid alienation or even worse in this environment?
Doug, I'll speak about how I've done that in social entrepreneurship settings. So yes, there'll be people that will, they hear that you're faith-based. And I remember giving a talk to a group. I was in a business group called, I still am, called Young Presidents Organization, although I'm too old to be a young president. Now they call it, they graduate you at age 50. So now I'm in World Presidents Organization, or YPO Gold, I think they call it. But somebody asked, the program chairman asked me to come and speak about what I'm doing with schools in Africa, et cetera. And then one of the members who's of a different faith said, "Gee, is this faith-based?" I said, "Yes, it is. We share Jesus Christ." And he's a good friend, but he just said, "Hey, I've heard enough. And he just walked out. So, but the next meeting, I just sat down next to him, and we're old friends again. We certainly get resistance from some other nonprofit organizations that, you shouldn't, this is oppressive, you're sharing the gospel, you're forcing your views on people. I said, no one has to come to the Christian schools that we partner with. We don't start any schools. There's about 1 million low-fee independent schools. Probably a third of those are Christian schools. So we come alongside, make them loans because they're financially sustainable. They repay the loans to build more classrooms, et cetera, and help them improve their Christian education and their academic education. And some criticize us, and we say, well, gosh, if you, by the way, we do require all of our school partners that they admit children of any faith or no faith. We want children who are Hindus and Muslims and or no faith or tribal religions to come and hear the gospel at these Christian schools. But we get criticized for it. I've also gotten, this is such an interesting thing, that I've had people say, oh, Chris, drop the Christian stuff and you'll raise much more money in your nonprofit. And so I said, well, let's look at some data. And I said, when I joined Opportunity National, there were 4 US-based microfinance organizations doing, so we headquartered here, but doing microfinance overseas. And I said, they're all about the same size. And by God's grace, Opportunity grew much faster over the several years. And I said, actually, currently, the Christian-based microfinance organization, Openly Christian, is raising more than the other 3 combined. So the data doesn't seem to support that if we were secular, we would raise more money. There are numerous well-to-do Christians that are really looking for ministries or social enterprises that are helping people and sharing the gospel, that they are combining the great commandment of loving God and loving your neighbor with the great commission of proclaiming the good news of Jesus Christ.
Wow, I love that. Facts-based answer. And you didn't have to be ugly about it. The facts speak for themselves.
Yes, well, it's not always that way, but it's so easy for some people to make assumptions that the facts aren't necessarily supporting that.
Well, Chris, in our short time, I bet you have inspired some today to more seriously consider Christian social entrepreneurship. Do you have some specific advice to give those that this is now kind of a more serious topic?
Thanks, Doug. I really I alluded to it earlier, wrestled with the idea, wow, do I really leave for profit business and respond to this offer that I'd been a donor to Opportunity International, but this offer that's come in to be the CEO. And I thought through it, but I'm so glad that I made that jump. And it's a big change. It's a big jump, and not all of what is learned in business, as I learned as an entrepreneur, transferred. Not all the principles transferred, but the great majority did. And I'm a big believer in that there is such a need for experienced business people who can bring that wealth of entrepreneurial experience, that wealth of that professional management experience into Christian ministries or Christian social enterprises. And first thing to do is pray about it, seek the Lord. That's always the first step. Then get advice. I went to my mentor, Merrill Oster. Lloyd Reeb has been a mentor of mine. Bob Buford has had such a big influence on my life, the founder of Halftime. That get that advice, and then just be open to, if the Lord's calling you, that this big change actually can result in wonderful things for many other people. You may be able to transform the lives of many other people if you respond to the Lord's calling to make the transition from, as Lloyd would say, success to significance, and use your skill to love your neighbor, especially helping disadvantaged people.
Well, Chris, if it's okay, I want to switch to our poll right quick.
Great.
And for those of you who are interested, Chris is going to answer questions in the second half. So pop them in. It's down at the bottom center of your screen. Click on that, type in your questions, and Chris will answer them, actually, whether you're there live or not. You don't even have to watch the whole program to see your answer, because you'll get a unique email to you with your answer from Chris in the video. So in our poll, here was our question. What aspect of using social entrepreneurial skills to grow God's kingdom challenges you the most? The first answer is knowing how to the proper balance between running your business and evangelizing. Second answer is knowing how much financial risk is appropriate for a Christ-centered enterprise. Third answer is knowing whether I have sufficient entrepreneurial skills to be successful. And our last answer is being prepared for the inevitable persecution from governments or ill-will people. So, Chris, in our poll, the answer that is most popular, but there's another one right below it, it's pretty almost 50-50. The first is, well, now it is 50-50. Knowing how the proper balance between running your business and evangelizing, and that is tied with knowing whether I have sufficient entrepreneurial skills to be successful. So as we wrap up today, and before we move into the questions, maybe you can use that preference that our poll is giving, and also there might have been some that joined us late. So could you kind of summarize it with the idea of that poll in mind?
Please. The Lord has given us all a platform, and I think we are called, just like the parable of the talents, where we are to use our talents and our platforms, my words, I'm adding that, but for the Lord, to look for ways to share, expand the kingdom of Jesus wherever we are and with those whom we know. So to seek out those who we can share the gospel and do it in the appropriate, sensitive manner. Expect at some point you'll get some blowback where someone will complain to somebody else or to human resources or whatever, and that comes with it. That's part of the persecution. But there is a First Amendment in the United States that you're allowed to freedom of speech and you're allowed to share your faith, but it has to be done. But there are also local laws, and as my labor lawyer has said to me, it all depends on if you get sued, it depends on the judge who hears the case. They may be favorable toward the First Amendment and sharing your faith, or they may be hostile to Christianity and not. So there is risk with that. Generally not a significant risk, but some certainly. Doug, would you remind me of the second question?
Yeah, again, I was looking for a summary, but also in light of our poll, there's the poll is pretty well split 50-50 between the balance between running a business and evangelizing, and the other is sufficient entrepreneurial skills. So maybe those in the audience, that's their biggest concern with pursuing a social entrepreneurial enterprise. So how would you advise them?
Yes. As we look at if one is an entrepreneur and the entrepreneurial skills needed, I'd say you have to be comfortable taking significant risks in many ways. So the risks are obviously financial. If you're putting up your own money to start your social enterprise or even a for-profit company, you're putting up your money, a lot of your time that could have been spent earning money elsewhere. Your friends you may ask your friends, and they'll ask what you're doing, and you tell them, and they may say, "Oh, that's never going to work." And then if you go and do it and it fails, by the way, I've started 2 or 3 organizations that failed earlier in my career, and you learn from those. So maybe they weren't such failures, but there's kind of the embarrassment. Oh gosh, I did that thing, and then someone might say, "Oh, I told you that wasn't going to work." But yeah, well, people told numerous successful, high-profile entrepreneurs what they were wanting to do wouldn't work. So that's. And then a big one is your family supportive? Is this just going to be too hard on your spouse or your children? It'll just be nerve-wracking? That's a real concern. I was very fortunate that when we bought the company, the Comps Info Systems that we did, that my wife was fully supportive. We put up our life savings, which wasn't much. The company had lost money for 5 years in a row. So that was the bad news. The good news is such companies are cheap to buy. And so she was supportive with investing our life savings. We had a child, our one son at the time. And so We kind of bet it all, and by God's grace. Well, but I had prayed and fasted for 2.5 days, and I just felt clear the Lord telling me there'll be great challenges. There were many significant challenges, but to go forward and step out in faith. And so, if the Lord's calling you, if there's wisdom in the counsel, there is wisdom in the counsel of many. If you're getting some of your most trusted advisors, mentors, and especially your spouse going along, I think that's good confirmation that it makes sense to pursue that calling into social entrepreneurship or even a for-profit enterprise.
Wow. Well, Chris, this has been fantastic. We are at the bottom of the hour, and I know some people only allow 30 minutes. So we thank those that have given their 30 minutes to hear you. For those that are interested, we're going to switch and answer your questions in our second half. So, Chris, if you're ready, we've got the first question in there, and we'll move into that. So, it's a little bit similar to an earlier question that I asked. And in today's politically correct society, it seems nearly everything and everyone is tolerated except biblical views. So how does a business leader include biblical principles in their business without creating a lightning rod for those that consider biblical views intolerant?
I think you pick carefully the people that you share your faith with. Sometimes you embrace biblical principles without specifically citing the scriptures. You just Proverbs is just filled with wise advice, and then you try to be loving toward everyone. Excuse me, but there'll be. I remember we let somebody go who wasn't performing particularly well, and then so he has a lawyer send us a letter saying, and that is religious discrimination, and he is every Monday he's praying, and he doesn't invite my client into that prayer. Well, we didn't. It was just the person who founded the business, who I bought majority interest from, and I would pray every Monday morning together. But so expect some persecution, some challenges, and that just comes with it. But the Lord told us if we are persecuted, just immediately after the Beatitudes, part of the Beatitudes, the last part of the Beatitudes in Matthew 5, if we're persecuted, then you have a reward in heaven. So I don't go looking for that persecution, but it may happen, again, depending on the state that you live in and the particular laws of that state. Is it a blue state or a red state? You're probably have more freedom in red states to share the gospel because more people are a conservative nature in those states.
Yeah, but you have a pattern, and you seem to answer them with facts that are, they're accurate, and and that's kind of disarming. So I like your answers. That's a great way to look at it. Well, we have another question, and let's move into this one. Don asks, are there organizations that are willing to invest in startup gospel-centered organizations? In my case, we are helping people to share the gospel.
So I would invest can be at Edify, edify.org. We only take donations. We don't take investments where we give a return on. But some of my largest donors, they say it's an investment, even though it's a charitable contribution. So there are certainly people who are willing to make charitable contributions to ministries sharing the gospel. And then if it's a Christian organization that's for profit, there's Faith-Driven Investor. That's a website. And then there's Faith-Driven Entrepreneur. Henry Kaestner started both of those organizations. And so Faith-Driven Investor, they're looking for Christians who are starting companies or running companies that want expansion capital. So yes, there are Christian venture capitalists, Christian private equity investors who are actively looking to invest in Christians who can generate a good return from a business.
Well, I'm going to work in one. And the question that I've got, since we're on this topic, and as I said, I never got to meet Bob Buford. The question I have is, was there a particularly inspirational story or example about entrepreneurship that Bob shared with you?
Yes. And I met Bob first in 1991. He was a member of this organization called Young Presidents Organization. So he put on a YPO event with Peter Drucker. So I remember got this fax and it said, hey, there's this, got 20 people are invited to come be with Peter Drucker. And so I live in San Diego. It's only an hour away from my home. And I said, Peter Drucker, wow, I want to attend that. So I signed up right away and got to meet Bob. And so through Bob, conversations with Bob, but also his book, Halftime, which was a seminal book for me, a pivotal book for me, because Bob gave me, in effect, permission to move from business into a social enterprise, doing microfinance in 28 different countries, and now doing education finance in 11 different countries, Latin America and Africa. But he had examples in there of people who had moved from business and had done things like that. And I said, wow, so this is not unique. This is not something unheard of or no one ever does. This is acceptable. And Bob has really now made it to some extent mainstream, that it is okay to do this and seriously consider doing it. And I can't emphasize enough how much important it is to bring that business experience. I remember sometimes when I first went into nonprofit work there, I am CEO, and we had a problem, and I'd say, oh, why don't we just do this? And some of the senior executives had always been nonprofit executives said, wow, how'd you think of that? And I'm thinking, any for-profit executive would have thought of this. So God bless the lifelong nonprofit executives, because they bring very important skills to bear, and also are helpful when we're off course. Because the first week I came in as CEO of the nonprofit, I said, wow, why don't we've got some fundraisers that raise 5 times as much as others. Why don't we put the fundraisers who raise so much money, and we're paying them almost the same thing, let's put them on commission so they raise even more? And they said, well, interesting idea in for-profit, but that's considered unethical in nonprofit. It's illegal in numerous states to pay somebody a percentage of what they raise in donation. Oh, I didn't know that. So not all principles apply.
So in your mind, Bob legitimized the direction you really wanted to go in anyway.
Open my horizons, and he's opened and broadened the horizons of many other people to use the valuable skills that the Lord has given them to make a difference in other people's lives. And I think any for-profit pursuit that's legal, ethical, that is a real service. I'll take a big name company, Procter & Gamble, maker of so many cleaning products, etc. That's valuable. That's and maybe perhaps the founders of Mr. Procter and Mr. Gamble were called by the Lord to do that. They probably were. But if you're called a social enterprise where you can also, for me, I'll just say this. At some point, we're all going to stand before the Lord. We're going to stand before Jesus, and he's going to, we've passed on from this life. And for me, one of the questions he's going to ask is, Chris, I gave you this tool of microfinance. Did you use that to help people work their way out of poverty? Did you help a lot of people with that? And so for me, I could say, Lord, I did use microfinance, and we helped a lot of people. We gave them these small business loans for their to buy a sewing machine and to buy fabric, or to buy welding equipment and welding supplies and whatever, 10,000 different businesses, and that they were able to feed their family and often employ other people. So yes, Lord, I did use that. And the second question he's going to ask me is, and while you were doing that, did you tell them about me? Did you tell them about Jesus and share the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ with them? And for me, the calling I feel from the Lord, I need to be able to answer yes to that question. So again, marrying the great commandment, loving God, loving your neighbor, with the Great Commission of sharing Jesus Christ and that good news, because that's what really transforms life. If we can help people, what we're doing is helping children get a good education, a good Christian education. But if we can impart Christ-centered character, that's our number one goal at Edify, isn't education. It is sharing Jesus. We've written that into our bylaws. I'm happy to share that with anyone who's interested, but it is the language that we use. But if we impart Christ-centered character, then we're a success, even if the education isn't improved. It is improving. So we've got that, because that is profound and long-lasting transformation. If we can help people materially, economically, that they can provide better for their families, but also that they have the knowledge of Jesus Christ, and hopefully they are beacons of the love of Jesus Christ, that they are transform their families, their communities, and we hope with there are about over 2 million children at the schools we've partnered with over the last 11 years, that some of them, because they're getting this good education, will rise to be leaders in business and government and media and law and science and other great endeavors, fields of endeavor, that they will lead. They will lead with the love of Jesus and just have a great impact on many other people, seeing that, gee, there's this Christian leader and they're doing great good in our country, and I'd like to have that Christian faith they have and be a leader like them.
Well, I know Lloyd has said many times that we need to pursue things that give us energy. And Chris, your energy just jumps through the screen at me. I've never seen your hands move so fast. Your smile is beautiful. And the energy that you have, it's clear that you really enjoy what you're doing. So thank you so much for your taking the time to share with us the stories, but also energize our day a little bit. That was wonderful.
Thanks, Doug. This has just been a joy. If I could just part with just a closing statement that my almost 20 years as a gospel-centered social entrepreneur has led me to conclude that profound and long-lasting transformation only comes if you incorporate sharing Jesus with helping people who are disadvantaged, to help them to meet their material needs, to better provide for their families. And we have to do that in culturally sensitive manners, do it appropriately, not be overbearing. But first of all, our example is what the old expression is, your actions speak so loudly, I can't even hear your words. If we're modeling Jesus, then so many people see that, and some might even ask you, gee, tell me why you're like that, or why are you, an American who could be just staying in the U.S. and working there? Why are you coming to Africa? Why are you helping us in Latin America? Why are you improving our schools? What causes you to do that? And then that will open up the door. But I just see that only Jesus can overcome the systemic problems that exist in so many developing nations, and these also, a lot of these problems exist in Western nations as well, developed nations as well. But the integrity taught by Jesus will overcome the corruption. The servant leadership taught by Jesus will overcome the self-serving leadership that we see in so many developing nations. The peacemaking taught by Jesus will overcome the tribal and political violence that is so present in so many developing nations. And as we saw last summer in our nation, and the love of Jesus will overcome hatred. So Jesus will overcome all if we are faithful to that. And I think we just need to continue our keeping our eyes on the Lord, who's the author and perfecter of our faith, and listening to the Lord, guide us in all that we do, and the Lord will bless us despite challenges, heartbreaks. Oh, have there been heartbreaks in my work in social entrepreneurship? You bet. Have I been misunderstood and people have criticized me? And I've had a school entrepreneur who I thought we significantly helped. He had 2 schools and a really good model. We helped him get to 10 schools. We made him these 0% interest loans in local currency, and then for 2 hours, one day he was yelling at me and at my chief operating officer, telling us we do things unethically, immorally, and illegally. None of that was true, but somebody from Europe had come in and said, "Oh, these terms that Edify is giving you are unfair." Really, 0% interest loans in local currency, and your currency depreciates about 20% a year. But he believed him, and so there'll be heartaches. And I lost sleep over that. I was so disappointed. I thought we'd done such a good thing, but that's like that. Since then, he actually took in money from the people from Europe, and then that was a disaster for him. He then asked me to take a look at the terms. I said, "Wow, don't be really careful about these terms." And sure enough, they didn't work. And so now we're friends again, but life happens and things happen. You will be misunderstood. Sometimes I give a speech at a university, and people say, "Oh, it's terrible. You're Christian, and you're only Christian schools. You do all sorts of." Well, if you really believe that, you start an organization and do work with all those other schools and feel so strongly about it. But hey, the Lord called me to do this, and that's my calling. And my calling from the Lord is much more important than your opinion, with due respect.
Well, Chris, thank you so much. And Mike has written there in the chat, and I'm just going to read it because I think it says a lot about how the rest of us. He says, "Thanks, Chris, for this great presentation and for your life. It's been a long time, but fond memories of our times together." So this is great, Chris. So inspiring, so much fun. Thank you for tolerating me. We missed Lloyd in today's event, but you helped me get through it. So thank you.
Well, Lloyd is great at doing this, Doug, but you did a great job. And I'll just close with, I just encourage anyone, if you're considering moving into social entrepreneurship, especially Christian social entrepreneurship, gosh, speak with Lloyd. He has had such a huge impact on my life and helped me think so clearly about things, and has various tools, frameworks for analysis to help you. But your life will be so much more. I think you can have 100 times the 100x that Bob Buford spoke about from the parable of the sower. You can have that 30 or 60 or 100 times impact if you use your talents and skills to help others. And there are so many people who will come alongside you and join you if you are embracing what the Lord's call is on your life and you pursue it with your heart. Thank you.
Excellent. And you can click on the link, maybe right about there on the center of the screen, to if you want to explore that further. So everybody, we thank you so much for your time today. Chris, we thank you. We'll be back next month, and we'll continue this series. We have a podcast coming and more excellent speakers. So thank you so much for joining us today. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us.